Alfred's ghost. Months have passed since Stepney was taken by the scrap dealers to be scrapped, and not only was he frightened of this experience until Molly and Neville were the only two engines to have noticed it. "It is strange," said Molly sadly. "Stepney was one of the bravest engines we've ever known. Whatever it was, it must have scared him good," said Neville to himself. But until some day later, Neville was taking some quarry trucks to the ballast mines. He was on his way to the mines when he heard an unfamiliar whistle that wasn't similar to his own. "That's odd," he thought. "When I left, all the other engines were stable at the sheds. Perhaps the Flat Controller must have sent one of them out on an emergency task." Until at last, Neville had finally arrived at the ballast mines and shunted his trucks into a siding, ready for the next train tomorrow. And he set off home. It was misty, and Neville didn't even like the fog. He hurried along the line. He could hear the sound of an engine's piston pounding, which wasn't like his own. He began racing, and by the time the sound was getting louder and louder, and without warning, a gust of wind blew past by the young engine. "What was that?" Neville asked his driver. "I'm not sure, old chap, but it muttered have been good." And Neville himself still had to carry on. But by the time Neville reached his shed, the other engines were worried about Neville. They could see he was feeling very, very anxious. Just then, he began telling them his experience. "I've just heard the sound of a steam engine coming towards me, and the thick gust of wind blew right through me, almost knocking me off the rails." "Cool down, Neville," chortled Emily. "It's just your imagination. You were so overtaken with Stepney's two encounters that it's tricked your mind to experiencing one of your own." Neville glared crossly at Emily, and before an argument could break out, Boko stepped in. "It's not fairy as you may think, Emily," he said. "Oh no, not you too. What did they do to you after your accident?" scoffed the single Stirling engine. "Do you remember Duke, the old engine? When I was waiting to be repaired, he also too went for repairs, and he told me about the legend which our railway has possessed." What legend?" asked the two engines together. "The engine that runs on the mid-Sodor still haunts our line." Emily burst out with laughter. "That Duke is a very old engine and probably goes on about something in the smoke box. Maybe his story might be good for a laugh." Boko growled at Emily and began his story. Duke was the only engine to operate on the mainland. He handled both freight and passengers. He enjoyed the peace and quiet and never complained. But the manager felt Duke needed a helping hand. So he went to speak with the old engine. "Now, I know you don't mind hard work, Duke, but I also feel like that you need a helping hand. So I've ordered a tank engine to help with the goods work. He should be arriving tomorrow." "Yes, sir," said Duke doubtfully. He had a sinking feeling in his boiler that this engine could be difficult. And indeed, he was. The engine was called Alfred. On his first day, the manager had assigned him to take some empty trucks. Alfred was not happy with this. "I'm supposed to pull those rusted planks?" shouted Alfred as Duke shunted them behind the saddle tank. "Indeed, Indeed, you are a youngster. The best way to have a good life is to obey instructions, he said crossly. Then what's an old fuddy-duddy like you to give orders? Retorted Alfred as he pulled out of the shed. And then Alfred's behaviour still continued. But until a few months later after his first day, the last thing Alfred was to take to the mines were some gunpowder and explosives. Duke warned him to be careful. You are carrying a lethal cargo. One stupid move or you'll be blown sky high. But Alfred just laughed. I'll handle the train my way. I don't have to take advice from you. As he blew his whistle and steamed out of the yards, Duke had the sinking feeling in his firebox that this will be the last time he'll see Alfred in one piece. But unfortunately, Alfred was rough with the two trucks. His driver and fireman were trying to persuade him proceedly. Here's rough riding again. Everyone will think he's in control at our tasks. Then he started laughing. Stupid old engine, stupid old engine. He laughed as he was racing down the line and giving his trucks a big bump. But when he soon reached the quarry, he gave the truck a violent bump, which caused the first truck to explode, letting up the same chamber reaction all over and over. While Duke was far away at Alsdale, it almost shook the entire valley. Soon the manager came running in urgently. There's been a fatal accident at the mine, so I need you and your engine to take the crane to lift off the remains of the engine immediately. What are the casualties, sir? Asked Duke's driver. An engine has just blown up and the crew have been killed in the accident. As Duke took a deep breath and went grimly into his haunted task. He was coupled to the breakdown train, and off he steamed to find Alfred and the gang. When he arrived, the scene was an awful one. Ambulances had arrived to take the casualties away, and what was left of Alfred was cut up for scrap. I warned him, grumbled Duke, but he wouldn't listen. And then all of the engines were in shock with Boco's story. What happened then? Asked Arthur. Ambulances arrived. Ambulances have just been and gone and laid the workmen to a nearby cemetery, and it had said that the spirit of Alfred still haunts our line. Then Neville figured it out. It must have been Alfred who I hear near the mines, he said. But Emily was not convinced. That story was good for a laugh, she said, and went to sleep. Until at last all the engines were really useful once again, as they were still finishing off their own tasks. While Emily was shunting some stone trucks for Oliver to take to the docks, she even said to herself, "What nonsense that smelly diesel goes on about," she said. "There may be ghosts around, but not here," she said to herself. But Oliver remained quiet after that. He knew that if he'd said something, he would never escape from a never-ending debate with the haughty single engine. Later that day, Stepney had broken down at the mainland. and Stephanie and Oliver had been called to rescue him and his passengers. While he was leaving Emily alone at the ballast mines. "Where are you, Alfred?" she said sarcastically. "Show yourself." She had shunted the trucks into the quarry tunnel, and then by the time she was about to set off home, there was a massive problem. The lever of the points would not budge. "The port levers has stuck fast," the guards reported to the foreman. "I'll send for a maintenance crew right away." But when he came back a few minutes later, he frowned. "No one will be called up until the morning, so Emily has to stay here for the rest of the night until tomorrow." Night came, and Emily gulped as she watched her dry room fireman leave on Oliver and Stephen's train, and the workmen with them. And Emily dozed off to sleep. "Ghosts indeed," she said crossly. "Those lot will believe anything," she said, and she dozed off to sleep. But then she woke up with another start. She could hear a group of workmen talking. "Must be the night shift," she muttered, and she dozed off to sleep. Then she woke up again with another start of an engine's whistle. "No," she whimpered, "it can't be." And as the sound was getting louder and louder, the fog died away to reveal a ghostly appearance of a red and black saddle tank engine. Emily froze as the spectre of Alfred stared coldly at her, and with a sudden blast of its whistle, the engine disappeared and left with the sound of a massive explosion. "No!" wailed Emily. "It can't be true." She closed her eyes tightly and remained that way for the rest of the night. At last, morning finally came, and the points mended. Emily was on her way back to the sheds when she found Stephanie and Oliver at the signet area. They had noticed Emily's scared face. "Hello, Emily," said Stephanie cheekily. "How was your night out?" Emily didn't say a word. She hoped what she had seen was all a bad dream, and if it wasn't, she would never have believed that she had to cope up with Alfred's ghost.